Lightning strikes. That's the name of our Devo today, and wherever you go, and we're encouraging ourselves. The book of Acts is full of verses about being encouraged wherever we go. So we've moved on from all the horrific wars and acts of violence that we talked about in the Old Testament, and talked about getting back with our exes last time. And this time we're moving on to Acts 9, the conversion of Saul. In fact, since the beginning of this year, I've actually been praying for Saul-type conversions among all our kids. What an encouragement that would be. But first of all, who is Saul and what is conversion? Saul was this really mean guy who breathed out murderous threats to those that followed Christ, and you might say he was a terrorist of sorts. He was on his way to do more harm when this amazing light fell on him, knocked him to the ground, and he heard God speak and ask, why was he persecuting the Lord? Saul didn't know who was speaking, so he asked, "Who are you, Lord?" Which is interesting to me because he said Lord in his question. So maybe that light was so revelatory in an instant that he knew it was God. God told Saul to get up and go to the city, but Saul had been struck by this light and was blind. So for 3 days he was blind and being led by others. And this other guy was told by God that Saul was going to be a chosen instrument to proclaim God's name, but that he would have to suffer much. This man of God obeyed. He met Paul and prayed for him, and immediately Saul was able to see again. And he spent a while with followers of Christ and then began to preach to others, to people that had known him before, and he was known as somebody that wreaked havoc on Christ followers. And then Saul himself was persecuted as he continued to speak boldly about God. So let's stop here. One reason I've been praying for Saul-like conversions is because so many of us have friends, family, or others that have fist up against God, or especially against those who follow God. Maybe our kids have been hurt, misunderstood, or treated poorly by those who claim to be Christians, or maybe we're the ones. And it doesn't matter how much we try to talk or persuade them to see the love of God, it's just not happening. We need a light to strike them from heaven and have their eyes open to the goodness of God personally to them, and we can't do that for them. This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible because it gives us all hope that the most lost among us, those most determined to hate and fight against all good, are not unreachable. In fact, when God's light shines, there's no limit to what God can do with the very meanest among us. After all, we were all mean and all fell short, and we're all in the same boat as those who taunt before we believed. So what does this have to do with being encouraged this year? It's everything. God pursued this man, he loved him and had a purpose, and he turned him around. This man was then understood because all the people knew who he had been before, but God kept him on the right track and he continued to obey, and in other words, it was all God's doing and keeping and miracle working. It's not up to us. Yes, we're to pray and believe and do what we can, but we're not to carry the burden of the conversion or change that we long to see in those who are so far from God. This lifts a huge load off of our backs and should encourage us that no one is too far gone, that the light of God cannot shine and reveal his goodness and grace. In the last part of the chapter, it says the entire church community was at peace and strengthened after this occurrence, and the people were living in the fear of the Lord and encouraged by the Spirit. Nothing encourages a family, a church, a city, or a nation like seeing someone find peace in their own lives, someone that was in so much unrest that they wreaked havoc on others. I'm betting that all of us have those in our families like Saul, and perhaps we can even remind ourselves that we were like that too, and we would have been on the road to destruction as well, except for the light. Wherever we go this year and wherever they go, the encouragement is that God is following and pursuing and overtaking all of us with his glorious light, doing a work in those we're praying for that we couldn't do in a million years of trying. I bet Saul had a praying mom and grandmother and a father or uncle that had been on their knees for years praying for him. Isn't that a beautiful picture? And we need to be on our knees for others, but the conversion, the lightning strikes, and the extreme pivots in those we pray for is not up to us. We can rise from our knees in hope and be encouraged and live at peace while we wait to hear of the lightning strike. And then we can watch the miracles unfold before our eyes.